Welcome to SIDEOUT with VNS, the volley video pod reaching out and engaging our fellow volley nerds in Nova Scotia and beyond. I'm John Elliott, Development Director for Volleyball Nova Scotia. My co-host is Megan Conroy, the Technical Director for VNS. And our guest today is Rick Scott, who's entering his 13th year as the head coach of the Dal University Women's Volleyball Program. Today we're talking about some different aspects of being a head coach of a club program and focusing specifically on all the planning that needs to happen, as well as the relationship building that needs to happen between coaches and their coaching staffs, athletes, parents, and officials. At the end, down in the description of the video, you'll be able to find some timed links to each topic. So if you want to jump around and listen to a specific question and answer, check out the video description. Definitely looking forward to this. Just before we get rolling with the questions, I'm going to share Rick's bio. Probably not going to do this justice either. So Rick grew up in Manitoba as a multi-sport athlete. He became an educator, taught in a number of Manitoba communities, and began his coaching career at the junior high level before moving into high school, club, and provincial team levels. Rick, what are the sports you coached besides volleyball while teaching in Manitoba?
Lots of them, actually. Hockey, baseball, basketball, badminton, track and field. That's about it. Yeah, I was a phys ed teacher, and back in those days, often you're coaching from one sport to the next, so it was great.
What's your badminton record all time?
Well, after I lost to Patty, about 101-2.
Fake news. In Manitoba, Rick's had four 4A high school championships on the female side, 2 Volleyball Canada National Club Open Championships, a U17 National Team Challenge Cup Championship, a U16 Western Canadian Championship, a Canada Games silver medal, and a Western Canada Games silver medal on his coaching resume. He was named High School Coach of the Year twice, Development Coach of the Year in 2006, Elite Coach of the Year in 2007, and was inducted into the Volleyball Manitoba Honor Society in 2011. In Nova Scotia, Rick's been just as successful. Dal is the 8-time defending AUS champion, and Rick has been named the AUS Women's Volleyball Coach of the Year 3 times and was recognized as the U Sports Women's Volleyball Coach of the Year for the 2016-17 season. He also founded and has coached within the successful Female Tigers Volleyball Club. Rick's had the opportunity to represent Canada twice. So he's been an assistant coach for a women's junior national team, I believe in 2010 at the NORCECA Championships, as well as last summer with the women's indoor team that competed at the 2019 World University Games in Naples, Italy. He's been a coach and mentor with Team Nova Scotia a number of times and was the head coach of the 2013 female indoor team that competed in Sherbrooke, Quebec. I'm a little out of breath after that, but Rick, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's good to see you guys, and I'm looking forward to this. Should be fun.
Awesome. So Megan and I will be alternating leading the conversation with questions on some different topics. And Megan's going to get things started with a few lob balls to get the juices flowing.
I don't know if she throws lob balls.
Fastballs.
Usually fast pitch. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, again, same for me. Thanks for joining us, Rick. It's good to see you. We're all still in isolation for anybody watching this in the future. It's May 25th, and we're all still in our own homes. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, and hopefully things are starting to lift maybe in the near future gradually, but for now we're still at home. So getting into some of the questions, Rick, I know you're a huge sports guy, even outside of volleyball. I love to watch and be around sports. But thinking about maybe your favorite professional or international volleyball athlete that you love watching, either past or present, and why you like to watch that player.
Yeah.
You can narrow it down to one.
Yeah. There's, probably just the couple of the ones that are international and pro are ones that I've really enjoyed watching are some players that I've coached. Megan Sear, Tabby Love, and Courtney Baker. That would have to be my answer, though. When I've seen them play, whether it was get into serve or actually play an entire match at an international competition, is pretty cool to see them on the floor and know that you've had the opportunity and pleasure to coach them. So that would be one for sure. Those would come to mind for me.
Yeah, amazing. That's a pretty special thing to be able to not only say, that there's some Canadian athletes that are playing and having a lot of success internationally, but when you've had them in your own gym for, more than a blink, that's pretty special, I would imagine.
Yes, it's really awesome to see. Because
And
usually,
they're all three female, which is great.
16.
Yeah. 2 or 3 words that you feel describe you as a coach and why.
Passionate probably would be one. Committed, and probably 3 would be competitive.
Yes, definitely. I've coached with you a bit. I would say those are pretty good. It's tough to kind of think of words to describe yourself. Usually you're asking other people to say what they feel, but
Sounds like a job interview right now.
what are your 3 strengths and weaknesses? No,
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think makes you so compassionate or so passionate about volleyball? What about you coach so many different sports? What really allowed you to focus on volleyball and continue that as now your profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I played it in junior high, that's when I first was introduced in grade 7 and 8 in my small town. But I right away really enjoyed it, and our team was pretty good for junior high in our little area. We lost in the final, heartbreaking, grade 8. But
Still remember it.
It was I really enjoyed just the teamwork and the idea of attacking, setting, spiking, and just the kind of teamwork that's involved and kind of the excitement, and power that can be shown. There wasn't a lot of power in grade 7 and 8, but we thought. I look back at that with fond memories, and that kind of got my start. And a teacher was just a grade 8 teacher, but got me going. And then moved to high school, and it became more competitive, and there was more students there trying out, and our teams were getting pretty good, and had some really good coaches that kind of instilled the love of the game and some great teammates. And yeah, I just really enjoyed playing in high school, and then that was it for my career. Other than playing in a couple Manitoba games, co-ed championships, never played college or university, but enjoyed watching it at University of Manitoba. That's where I went to university and got to know some of the players there, and eventually coaches. And then the national team was based out of Winnipeg at that time. That's kind of where I got my kind of love for it. I love all sports though, and but volleyball was one that I always, all the ones, jack of all trade, master of none in high school. I really love volleyball too. So that's probably why.
Yeah, it's there. There seems to be a common thread when we ask our guests that question, in that there always seems to be a key person who brought everyone can always remember who brought them into the sport. So that first kind of glance at volleyball, that first ignite moment, that impact seems to last through no matter who we ask that question to. So seems similar with you. And this is going to be a tough question because you've coached for a number of years and had lots of successes. What's your fondest volleyball coach memory so far?
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. I'll go with 2, but I think one of them would be just a cool moment is with when I was with Team Canada and when they were playing the national anthem, and you were actually on the bench and kind of singing it and taught to sing it and be proud. But it was a really special moment to kind of be standing there and say, am I really part of this? Representing your country with a sport. That first time, that was in 2010, and with Kevin Neufeld and Derek Rochelles, and they were the coaches of that team, and they'd asked me to come on as a team doctor / assistant coach. So I had to go to the doctor's meeting. That was an experience. But yeah, standing on the sidelines, wearing the red and white and hearing your national anthem for sure. And then I think, the university titles, and the first one was pretty special, winning that. It's the highest level I've been the head coach. So that was very exciting to win that championship.
Awesome. Thanks. I get goosebumps even hearing someone else talk about, being able to represent Canada and hearing that moment, which is just, not very many people get to do that. So it's pretty special.
Yeah.
And our last kind of opening icebreaker question, what is maybe an embarrassing or funny coach memory that you might have from your tales of coaching?
Whoa.
That's appropriate for our viewership.
There's a lot. There's a lot. One that is often discussed as we were in the Western Canada Games final gold medal game in 2007 in Edmonton, and a lot of university coaches and future university players on the team, and we were in the gold medal game against BC, and it was really loud in the it was the arena. They're playing in the arena, but like you could hardly hear because the games were almost done. It's like Canada Games, but smaller Western Canada Games. And my players had trouble hearing me, but it was intense. And I was one of the game plan was Megan Sear had to dump the ball a lot every set because it really helped their offense. So we maybe didn't have the guns to go against them. And I yelled at her. I said, Megan, dump the darn volleyball, and she like couldn't hear me. And I'm like, dump the volleyball. And she goes, I'm in the back row. She screams at me. And I'm like, sorry. But it was just like we couldn't hear each other. And then we just smiled. But that was a funny moment that some of my friends witnessed or have heard about and have a chuckle, and she laughs about it now when we talk about it. So I was just trying to remind her she needed to dump. We were having trouble scoring, but I didn't realize she was actually in position 1 at the time.
Well, good for her for knowing.
Oh yeah, she let me know.
Yeah, she's pretty opinionated. I gotta share my favorite Rick Scott embarrassing moment. It's clean though, it's PG.
Good.
One of my first 2 years, I was able to coach with you. We were at UNB, and we were in probably a dogfight with one of Johnny Richards' teams, and a call went against us, or at least you thought it did. And like you said, you're passionate, and you're standing right in front of the assistant coaches. You did like a full tuck jump, like I'm talking knees to the chest. Like if we were jump testing, you would have hit a max that day. But when you landed in your squat, you split your pants like fully.
I remember it very well.
And you just stood straight up, like legs together, straight up, as quick as I've ever seen anyone move, and just kind of like turned around and was like, boys, I think I just split my pants. And and then you just went and sat back down for the rest of the match, which, I think we ended up, I don't even know how the match finished, but
we didn't win.
Oh, okay. Well, neither did your pants.
Worth it.
But just good times. Had to put that one out there in the world.
That was a funny one.
Yeah, those pants are no longer alive.
No.
History.
Just only through folklore at this point.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't deny that story though. That's truth.
Yeah. Yeah. It always comes back to me. All right, so that's the lob balls or the fast pitch. We're going to kind of get into some of our main topics. So I think we all know there's a lot of different hats that coaches need to wear to be successful at whatever level they're coaching, high school, club, university, professional. We're going to talk as much about, or I guess we're going to focus a lot more on the off-court parts of being a coach than the on-court. So we're not going to spend as much time talking about practice or practice plannings or matches, but we're kind of looking to dive into everything else. And we're going to break the conversation into 2 main areas. So kind of the first one being planning and everything that has to do with that. So seasonal planning, booking tournaments, travel, financials. And then the second part of that, which is huge, is just, relationship building. So, working with other coaches or coaching staffs, the relationship with athletes, with parents, and with referees. So if we get into kind of planning, and we'll kind of think seasonal planning here, what are some important areas that you consider when you're creating your seasonal plan for a club program?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a number of things that you want to think of, but for me, some of the most important areas are one of the first things I look at is, when do we want to be at our best? So when does our team need to be at our best and to be most successful? And what is that? That's volleyball. That's physically. That's mentally and emotionally. Um, and what are some tough things or important things that are going to also affect that? And so obviously there's midterms and exams, and those are some things that I kind of look out initially, and then I obviously get into just our planning of training. How much volume do we have, and how much intensity? So what's happening in terms of the areas that we're going to focus on from week to week or day to day, and then the volume as it relates to competitions. So obviously another important one is having your competitions, your league competitions, and your playoffs and your exhibition competitions in there, and planning the training around that. I think with the training comes volume, and also something I've really learned is the importance of rest and recovery for the athletes physically, but also mentally, B, and emotionally, C. Especially the fact that they're students, there's a lot of demands on them. And then there's the life demands. So look at training, look at competitions, look at planning the physical training, how we're going to incorporate that within their academic schedules and our on-court schedules, and how can we be most effective and efficient, because time is a real big thing. They're very busy, and I really believe in the physical training component, and I love doing it as a team. I think it's really valuable, not necessarily the whole team, but half the team ideally would be great. And then look at fitting in the mental training component, and also team building stuff that we can have. So those are, I think, some of the main areas that I would look at. And then, maybe just special events that we have, like Women in Leadership Dinner, Academic All-Canadian Luncheon, Athletic Banquet, just in that season. So those are some of the areas that I would...
Just a few.
Yeah. Training and competition are probably the two biggest ones. And then the things that I mentioned around that.
How much of a challenge is that in the club world, when you're looking at, your athletes have all those things you just mentioned, plus maybe a band, maybe choir, maybe they're playing other sports. Well, hopefully they're playing other sports up to a certain point. How difficult is that to manage as a club coach when you're trying to do a seasonal plan?
Like if I'm a club coach and a university coach, or just for club coaches?
Just for a club coach, yeah.
I mean, I think it's, I think when you're starting out coaching, there's a lot that you don't know or don't realize. You don't know what you don't know. So with experience, you kind of learn, that they should be more than just volleyball players. And me being a teacher, growing up in an education family, like teaching was always an education, big parts of my life. So I know as a coach, it should be, education first, and then any of these club players should be going to school, and that should be their priority. And then the volleyball, there needs to be a commitment there, but also knowing that they might have some other things, and then hopefully working in their strength and conditioning. So, finding a plan that works for them, that isn't too much, to overwhelm them, but is enough to train so that they can get better. More isn't always better. It's more about having really effective practices, I think, and effective strength and conditioning. So just kind of planning that out as to how you're going to do it. And then just for a club coach, we often put our strength and conditioning, or what I've done in the past and do now, is strength and conditioning at before or after a practice, just so the kids don't have to come twice.
Right.
you know, which for travel and for their time, it gives them more time to be students and also to have a social life, spend time with family and friends, or work.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, something that I kind of thought of, or that when listening to you answer that, is it kind of also depends on like what the goal of your program or your team is. And I mean, a lot of what you said is going to apply no matter if you're a team that's maybe trying to win a provincial championship or medal at nationals, or if you're a 14U team that is, you know, recreational based. Like you still want to kind of map out, you know, when are your tournaments. It doesn't matter if you're medaling or not. Like when does your group want to play well? How to balance all the things in a 14-year-old's life, or a 18-year-old's life, or a university student's life. And yeah, definitely as a young coach, it was, you know, volleyball is the end all be all. And like, obviously I'm putting all my time and effort. So you as a kid should put all your time and effort in, and you learn pretty quick that that's a pretty unhealthy way to coach, you know, or to be coached probably. So no, I definitely see that there's a lot of relation no matter what level or ability you're coaching there.
I think you're always still learning too and evolving with that. Like it's not like I'm a master at periodization or planning right now, but you know, I think one of the things you do is just your own experience. You learn some key things, you know, and strategies like you just mentioned. And I think another really cool thing to do is to maybe try to engage your players, to listen to them, to see how they're doing and what they find. And hey, when is a stressful time for them? You know, like when is their school exams? When is their midterms? Maybe there's something goes on that you're not aware of in their life, or they're all experiencing, you know? So I think, you know, planning accordingly with that. And then just some simple ones for club is, you know, before tournaments, the volume, depending, I guess, where you are in your season, but volume should come down a little bit. Like the day before you're playing, you got a tournament of 2 days. Like you shouldn't be having too many jumps the night before, you know, and that's something that I didn't always necessarily follow when I started out. Like we'd want to go hard to make sure we were ready, you know, never minding how many jumps they're going to have over those 2 days. And then also making sure that there is recovery time after, you know, and or if you do want to practice Sunday, maybe you play Friday, Saturday, or you play Saturday, Sunday, and you have Monday. 2 options to give them the day off, or else just no jumping. You know, maybe we're just going to do passing, you know, and serving, you know, just some other things that aren't as stressful. You know, so, but that's the physical side, but then there's also, they got to come to the gym. There's that emotional and mental side, you know, that you might think you're giving them a break, but it's still not a break because they're having to come play volleyball, depending where you are in your season. And that can be for club or high school coaches too.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of talked about competition a few times in there. So just what are your ideas on, within club, deciding how many competitions to have within your season, and what competitions to attend? Like what goes into your thought process of like how many, and like maybe some of the different qualities you'd want to go to at different times throughout a club season?
Yeah. So I think you want to determine when your club season starts. So if your club season starts early January and goes till May, you know, you'll look at that period. I know there was some clubs that I coached when I first started coaching club volleyball. We didn't start till actually after basketball. So in Manitoba, that was like mid-March to end of March. And our club season was in effect 6 weeks to 8 weeks. So, and I think there are some clubs that could be, you know, in rural communities or maybe even urban, just depending on what kind of training load that they want to put in or amount of time. You want to look at that. So your time period and what's appropriate. And I think for us, you know, I've always kind of had that first month to just be training, you know, 3 weeks to a month. So didn't need competitions till February. And then from there, I thought it was, you know, positive to have 2 competitions a month, you know, a couple in February, a couple in March, a couple in April. So it was usually 5 or 6, and then provincials and nationals. And so I think you have to be careful about going back to back to back, like 3 in a row. Sometimes you can't avoid it. And that gets to your second part, is what do you look for in tournaments? And for me, I think good competition would be one, or appropriate competition, depending on where your team is. I don't think it helps necessarily to go in a tournament where you're going to beat everyone 25-5. And it's not good if you're going to go in a tournament and lose every game 25-5. So that's not great for the athlete experience or coach experience, So finding out tournaments that are appropriate for your level are good. And then obviously picking some that will challenge you, so because I think it's important. There are tournaments where you get pushed and you can lose. I've always been a believer in that. I've been lucky with a lot of teams to be pretty strong, but definitely I always like going to some tournaments where we had to face out of province competition and would lose, or even in the USA. And if we were in the rural communities, go and play in the big bad city teams, and get beat. But I thought there was a lot that we would learn from that, to realize there's these levels that we can get to. So, and if we had a little weaker team, is making sure there was some tournaments where we would experience success, not necessarily win, but be really competitive, but win a couple matches would be really nice for the athletes' confidence. So those would be a couple of things, just the volume, having a weekend off, or if we played 2 in a row, that's fine, but making sure we do have a weekend off or 2 following that.
Great. I guess another part of being a coach that we often don't think of is like you have to be the accountant usually, or you're like the head, you're kind of like the leader of all the money. So what are some things that's worked for you for, financially planning out a season, to make sure that, bills are paid, tournaments can be entered?
Yeah, definitely an area not of strength. But definitely an area over time you've learned to improve and get decent at, and so, but I can think of when I started, there wasn't a lot of planning or thought that went into it too much, but it is really important, and especially club nowadays is becoming more and more costly. And so I think, having a really good budget and a plan of what you're going to be doing and what the costs are. And I also think using a parent rep or 2 that are skilled in that area, I think that's important, that they want to do it, but also that they have some knowledge in that area. Because if you're getting someone to do it that's not their strength, that kind of defeats the purpose. It can cause you more stress and headache, because you want to be accountable and transparent. Those are the 2 big things. You want to be able to show parents and athletes, this is what you spent, this is where your money's going to. So gym time, uniforms, gear, certification, tournaments, nationals, provincials, coaches honorarium, right? And just be able to clearly lay that out. Not just like, this is how much you pay, see you later,
Right.
So yeah, especially a year like this year, really important because season got cut. So to be really accountable and then show people this is the refund and this is why. So, but having a parent or 2 as a treasurer or secretary treasurer to help with that, it's really valuable, because obviously coaches going to have to do a little bit of it. Usually at the end of the day, they're responsible depending on the club, but a parent can really help with that time commitment and that job and take a lot of stress off you.
Yeah, totally
A
agree.
great suggestion.
And this kind of ties in with financials, but what are some best practices for you in planning travel? And I mean, obviously throughout the year, I mean, maybe you're going to nationals at the end of the year, so you're popping on a plane, but even though some of those smaller tournaments, booking overnight, even just like driving to a Yarmouth tournament or something like that, like what's worked for you in making sure, things go off without a hitch?
Yeah, I think, again, what we've kind of incorporated, because there's so much to coaching now, or the team, as you mentioned, for the coach to run the team, coach it, and be in charge of transportation, accommodation, finances, it's a lot, right? And some can manage it, but usually they have help, whether it's an assistant coach or a parent rep. So I again would look at finding, because I find that I've had a lot of success with some excellent parent reps that are really invested because their child's playing, their son or daughter, and again, this is something they're super organized and good communicators, that they are happy to take on and are just on top of it. So, I think in traveling, you want to be as efficient as possible. I think if you're traveling 2 hours to try to, if you have a team of, let's say, 10 to 12 athletes and 2 or 3 coaches, so anywhere from 12 to 15 people, to try to take, 4 or 5 vehicles is a lot better than taking 10. So kind of having that, someone take the initiative to say, hey, which parents are going, and hey, I'm going, let's save some money, save some costs, why don't you hop in with me? Now, if every parent wants to go and drive on their own, that's fine. Fill your boots, but also maybe parents can hop in. Maybe they have a minivan and they can take turns and share some of the costs, because I've seen over the years, sometimes, most of the time, the parents that always do it are happy to do it, but I've also seen sometimes where there may be a little frustration because they've driven all the time, and this particular athlete got a ride all the time, and there was never any compensation for it. So not that they were bitter, that's not why they're doing it, but it's just something you want to be thoughtful of, I think, and I would present that at the beginning of the season, that, like, we want to share costs and we want to share travel and be efficient. And I think it's part of the team building when you can ride with 1 or 2 teammates. Like, those are some fond memories I have of all kinds of sports, riding in vehicles with teammates and having laughs. So I encourage you to do that and save money. And then just if you weren't ever able to drive because you're too busy or work doesn't permit, maybe just sharing a little bit of the costs for gas.
Great. And I mean, I think the big thing I took from all of that is finding ways to share, share that responsibility. And you might have some parents or guardians who are amazing resources within your group. And obviously it's going to be great for you to take some of the weight off your shoulders as the coach, but it's also, we're going to talk about parent engagement later. But it's definitely a way to leverage strengths, engage parents. I love it. You did good.
And every parental situation is different. So, I've seen just where some of my former players, just their parent wasn't able to come to many of their games, and the parent didn't really want to miss, maybe it was single parent or just work, but, you still want to be mindful and thoughtful of someone who is driving those people and having a good plan so someone can come and isn't left at home because they didn't have a ride.
Right.
Which would be the worst thing, right?
Yeah. Coaching's hard, guys.
So,
this is a lot of stuff to think about.
Coaching is hard. It's one of the first things, as you guys may or may not have heard, is I tell people is coaching is very hard. And once you do it for 10 or 20 years, you'll understand.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about X's and O's or systems you're running or anything like that, and I'm tired.
It's very rewarding.
It's
awesome, but it's hard.
Yeah, having good people in your corner can definitely help alleviate some of that by this time.
Huge, and people are willing to help, so it'll allow you to be a more effective coach, I think. Because if you're stressed about budget and travel and accommodation, sometimes you can bring that to a practice or game, and you're not at your best. And I've been there, definitely. So that's something I think for coaches to consider is how can they be at their best for their athletes?
It's huge. As a young coach, as you mentioned, like the first 10 years I coached, I ran my own, well, in Newfoundland, there's no club. So it was a school team, but we ran our school team all year and I did everything. And I liked doing everything. I liked having control of everything, but I was exhausted. And the amount of hours and time I spent putting into it was significant. And moving to Nova Scotia and finding out about the club system and these things called parent reps, I'm like, why didn't I think of this before? There was always great parents around and that certainly would have said yes if I had asked, but relinquishing that control sometimes is also difficult.
I think just to add to that with the parent reps, from my experience, is, you also want to make sure that you can have a good working relationship with that parent. Because if they're going to be very involved in finances or travel, you're going to have to deal with them a lot, and that's awesome. But sometimes things go sour if they feel that their son or daughter isn't playing enough or getting the opportunity that they deserve. Then that becomes a real stressor, potentially dealing with that parent if there's a tough situation for 2 months. So kind of knowing your parent and knowing that you're going to have a good relationship, working relationship, no matter kind of what happens in terms of playing time or winning or losing, you know, is something. It would be a mistake not to consider from my experience.
Yeah, great point of advice. Moving from kind of planning and talking about ways to kind of manage some of the issues, or not issues, but things you have to deal with as a coach. Moving into relationships and talking about relationships with some of the kind of key pillars as a coach. We're going to start off talking about relationships with athletes. So there are definitely a lot of different areas that a coach has influence over in creating a rewarding experience for an athlete or group. And I think that's for most of us as coaches, that's a big part of why we do things and wanting to provide those memorable experiences and positive experiences for our athletes. I have a couple of different topics. I think I have 4. Of just trying to get a few thoughts from you about, some best practices that you use in terms of ways to create relationships with athletes. Thinking about a couple of perspectives. So the first one, just talking about how do you communicate with your athletes? What's some effective ways that you communicate with athletes, or what are some things to consider when you're talking about communicating with athletes?
Yeah.
That could be an episode itself, I know.
Yeah. No, it's really important. I think just a couple of my first thoughts are, teaching and coaching, you're in the people business. I've always said that. It's the people business. So you can think back to some really teachers that were your best teachers. They might not have been the smartest teachers, but they were probably really good because they were able to communicate really well with you, and they probably cared a heck of a lot. But when I think back, and there's a lot of other things that go in, but so I think with coaches and athletes, coaches and anyone, but we're speaking coaches and athletes, you need to have good people skills, and which means you need to be able to communicate well with your athletes, and you need to really care about them genuinely. And how do you do that? It's changed a little bit just in how you communicate from when I was starting. There was no cell phones and text messaging, but I think obviously the in-person communicating, so whether that's in your office in an open door policy, which is the rule of 2 now, is to have the door open, but sit and just chat and ask them about themselves, like, hey, how you doing? A little bit about your mom and dad and siblings, and what do you like and what don't you like? And once they know that you really genuinely care about them, you'll be able to, from my experience, get a lot more out of them. And I mean genuinely care. I had an athlete that I coached in Manitoba. She went to Ohio State, and Ohio State, but she said the coach there never once asked about her family. And this is something that I thought, wow, that was a good learning moment for me just as a coach, that if I ever was in that situation, that is something you want to do. But that's can be the high school or junior high or club, just about the person, and it can be a 10-minute conversation, So I think doing it in person is best in an open area. Maybe it can be before practice. Maybe you pick 1 or 2, athletes that come just before practice and you have a little chat. Maybe it's after. I kind of like before, just in general, because everyone's calm and hopefully clear-minded. You could have a bad practice or frustrating practice, but whether it's before or after, regardless, taking some time to talk to them, and making sure you try to hit every player on your team. That's important, and making a note of who you have talked to. So you can have the player meetings, the formal ones where they come and meet with you,
Mhm.
which I think are important. But I also think some of that informal stuff is pretty important, that you can do, before practice, after practice type thing, or at tournaments,
Yeah.
and really asking and finding out about themselves, and really listening to the athlete. I think that's a really important piece of communication that I've really learned, is the importance of listening. And a lot of people think communication is talking, but really listening to the athlete. What makes them tick, or what do they like or not like? How are they doing? How are they feeling?
Yeah. Well, one of my follow-up question was going to be, what are some kind of barriers to communicating with athletes? What are some either roadblocks that you come up against, or how did you deal with them?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I found to be pretty successful is, sending a quick text to an athlete, saying, "Boy, you had a great practice today," because we're so busy and they're running off to class or study hall, and you didn't have a chance to tell them. And if you don't address it right away, you might forget the next day, or something else has come up. There's lots that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now, you want to be very careful about texting athletes. You need to have someone else on there, assistant coach,
Yeah.
or what have you. But I think, I was just thinking, like, that's a quick way, and that, boy, some athletes have really appreciated that. Like, thanks a lot. That means a lot. Like, just loved your energy today, because it is hard to find time to get that done with everyone. And then now with some of the rule of two movements, which are really good for the safety of players and athletes, is, I think just finding some time before and after practice that you can do this kind of stuff, or schedule a meeting, wherever that may be.
Yeah, definitely. You've mentioned, athlete checking in with athletes. Is that something obviously you're talking about doing it at the beginning of the season when we're talking about learning about athletes and learning about their families and really listening to that. Is it valuable to do check-ins throughout the season?
With the athletes?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I think, yeah, it's an ongoing, because things can change in a hurry. We'll refer to club athletes, but they can be doing great on February the 10th and February the 25th. They've had a rough couple weeks, volleyball wise, school wise, personally, and so checking when with ongoing is really important. And I think when you see something as a coach, maybe they're a little bit off, it's really important. And one of the things that I've liked to encourage my athletes to do, to welcome them to come and talk to me if they're having a bad day. And they might not want to tell me what it is exactly, and that's fine. But if I know as a coach, when they come to practice, there's been something at home with mom and dad, or maybe something's happened with grandma, or you failed the test, or you broke up with your partner, but just letting as a coach you're having a bad day, and then you can respect that and give that athlete a lot more slack, and then you can follow up after and say, how you doing, and just really establishing that culture, and for them to feel comfortable to come and tell you that. I think it's really helped some of my experience with athletes when they've done that.
Absolutely. Thinking about, how does the quality of the daily training environment affect the relationship with athletes? So how do you create that, when athletes come into your gym? What has created some positive relationships with athletes with respect to that? Or conversely, what could have a poor effect on relationships with athletes?
Well, I think you'd want to, the big word is cultures, have the culture of how you like to do things, your team, in terms of athletes and coaches' expectations. So when they arrive, what time they arrive, what should they be doing when they arrive, when the coaches will arrive. And then, I think, them just getting there and that all being equal, that they're doing all that stuff, is just trying to have myself engage them, or a lot of times my assistant coaches, I give a lot of ownership to them to really engage the athletes and talk to them and try to make connections, and
Mhm.
I often try to tell the coaches again to look out for not always the star or the most popular athlete, but try to make connections with someone who, maybe you think's been struggling or is a little quieter, to make sure that they feel really welcome and comfortable. Maybe someone from a different community, or they're new to the team,
Yeah.
make sure you try to find some time with them to welcome them, and then try to get your players involved to be pretty engaged, to whether it's involved in warm-ups for their experience or stretching, or maybe it's introductory activities that they have a say in it, and they're engaged in it. Um, that's going to be good. I love music at the start. This is something that always
Yeah.
makes people smile, um, and create some energy. So those are a few things just off the top of my head.
Yeah. That's great. That's you listed so many small things, and I think that's kind of there's two things I'm getting from what you're saying. One is the small things really matter, and creating those personal connections with your athletes are what really help build the foundation of those relationships moving forward, to create that open door policy where athletes feel like they can tell you if something's not going right, and just keeping a pulse on what's happening, and like you said earlier, really stuck with me, genuinely showing that you care about the athletes you're coaching. They really notice it through your behaviors, not just saying at the beginning, I really care about you guys. So I think those are some great points for coaches as well. Anything else? We're going to move on to relationships with coaches. If not, any other kind of relationship with athletes, key things that you can think of that we didn't touch on?
I mean, just one of the things in terms of relationship with athletes, like we do some reflections after games. We don't do them after practices. We have tried a little bit after practices, but just again, having them communicate some of their thoughts to you is, as a coach, is very valuable, and they've done that just via text or email,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and then being able to reply to that in a timely fashion, and really say, hey, that's a great point, to engage them. And even if they didn't play, some of my best reflections have been from athletes who didn't play in games. And I think some of those people really still feel valued when you see their reflection and you put a lot of time into your response to them, or are appreciative in them doing that, And so it's just, again, a little thing. Talk about player coach relationships, like he or she shows me they really care about me, and it's not just because I'm not on the floor, but they value me as a person and valuable team member, and that I'm contributing. So, and just real quickly, I think the relationships, if you don't have that culture at the start, because I've been in a lot of gyms that's not organized, in my opinion, or chaos, not the same one or two people setting up the net, the balls aren't out, they're not ready to go, they're not stretched, that it's hard to have those positive relationships, if you're a coach that wants that, because then you're frustrated, or it's just one or two people doing it all the time, and then they're frustrated that other people aren't doing their part. And it's just a whole culture thing that, well, this is what we need to do in training to have a positive experience for our team, and we all need to do our part. So I think that's something I see a lot of club coaches, school coaches, that I think they can improve on, is being ready to go, and the players knowing what they should do, and make sure they're doing their part,
And I think that applies to any club. It doesn't matter if you're at the highest level of competition or you're just starting out. Putting thought into, how do I want my gym to run? What kind of culture am I trying to create? Like you said, maybe working with athletes to figure out, give them some empowerment with creating that culture. But, it's a lot of purposeful planning with those things of what you kind of want it to look like, and then talking about it, and then putting it into action by demonstrating behavior, and then kind of doing checks to make sure, you can't just talk about culture at the beginning of your season and then, say, oh, we set that out and off you go. I've been in a gym with you lots where, even at the end of a season, we're still talking about body language. We're still talking about what the culture or what that looks like, you know, at the end of a season just as much as the beginning. So it's a lot of planning, but then also I think sticking to it throughout your season is what it keeps the culture going and growing through the people that are involved. So that, again, I think it doesn't matter what level that you're coaching at, all of those points are really valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took two things, big things from what you said is you kind of talked about, you know, athletes, they need to know that you care, or that you need to care about the athletes as more than just like their volleyball abilities. And I mean, a quote I've seen out and about is they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
You know, really resonates. And then and you talked about the power of check-ins, and you mentioned formal check-ins, but you know, had a lot of success with, you know, talking with athletes throughout a season about, maybe it's the week after a tournament, of, hey, like, you did this well, maybe this is something we're going to work on together in the next 2 to 3 weeks before the next tournament. I think obviously that's important with athletes, and I think it's like almost double important maybe for some of those athletes that don't see the floor as much. Maybe they're not a starter. They know you care. They know you noticed maybe some of the positives they did in their limited time, but they also hear from you that, hey, like, you did, maybe this is something we need to work on, and like, I got a plan in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Like, we're gonna work on hitting the ball cross court from the left side, so that when you're on for those like 5 or 6 points in a set, like, you have one more shot in your tool bag. So, I mean, you didn't directly mention formal or talk about formal check-ins, but I mean, I learned that from you, so you don't necessarily have to talk about it, but it has a lot of power.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, depending on the size of your team and your time commitment, we talked about it earlier, is just trying to, if you have assistant coaches that can help with that, I mean, it's a lot to put on one coach, you know, it's because there's a lot of work there. So, like, obviously the head coach needs to really make the effort, but assistant coaches can really engage team members, and that can be really positive for their experience. And, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, at the end of practices, I know you guys have done it with Team Nova Scotia, and we've done it like the hard hat or the belt award for, maybe it's energy, or maybe it's work ethic, or maybe it's improvement, or maybe it changes from week to week or month to month. But, you know, that can be kind of a fun thing when you talk about athlete experience, or maybe having a fun activity, you know, every practice for 10 minutes at the beginning or end is valuable for their experience, you know. And as much as even at the highest levels, you see teams doing that kind of stuff, and it makes it fun and enjoyable for them, you know. So, you know, we could talk about it all day for sure.
Well, we'll get on to coaches. So I'll just ask you this. So you're building a staff for your club season. You're looking for support throughout the season. What are some qualities as a head coach you're looking for in an assistant?
Yeah. For number one is I'd want to be finding a loyal person that's going to be loyal to our program and me as the head coach, because there's going to be a lot of tough decisions and a lot of things that go either way. So it's something that I was taught, and it's very true. There's more than that you need, but I think it's one that a lot of coaches wouldn't think of unless they've had a lot of experience. So I think finding someone that's going to be really loyal to you as a coach doesn't mean you're going to agree with them all the time, but you're going to support them. And if you disagree, you'll do it in the right place, in a closed room, or at the right time, right? Being a hard worker, I would want someone that's really going to work hard. And it might be that they can only come to one practice a week or 2 practices a week, but when they're there, that they're going to work, you know. Obviously, if they can be really committed and they're a lot, that's going to be important, because you can be the best assistant coach in the world. If you're not able to be there, it becomes challenging, right? Especially for club teams. I think knowledgeable is a given, you know, if they have good volleyball experience. But I think also looking for someone who's willing to learn and really coachable as an assistant. For me at club, I would take them if they're motivated and committed, I think that you can do a lot with those people as assistants. Again, I use the word care, and I think being professional is pretty important too. It's you're working with young people, and it's a big responsibility. So with that comes some maturity and professionalism and understanding that, so those are about 7 or 8, I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's great. We're going to switch it around the other way. So, there's a lot of people that want to volunteer their time, but they don't have the time to be a head coach in a club program, but they have the time to be an assistant. So if you're looking to volunteer your time as assistant coach, what are some qualities to look for from a head coach to want to work with them?
Yeah. I just want to go back to that one thing that I think is important, and it would affect the club in a little bit. It would, but it's just sometimes adding assistant coaches that can complement you, because we all have our strengths and areas to improve, or weaknesses, however you want to say it. I like to say areas to improve. But if someone's really good with video, or someone's really good with physical training, or someone's really good technically, someone's maybe a super manager, that can be a really important role as an assistant coach. And then you're learning more about the volleyball, so something that complements you, but that's different than you, or addresses some of your weaknesses as a head coach. I think that's an important thing to consider. Looking assistants. Now, the other way, what should an assistant coach look for in the head coach if they were looking to go on a team? I think someone for me that's going to be, there's some similar stuff, but I think a real good leader. I think leadership's really important. And that encompasses a lot. But I think if you can find someone that's a leader that you can learn from, because I think that's a big part of coaching is leadership. I think being a good communicator, so that they communicate with you about what they expect from you, and listen to you about what you would like to do or what you can bring to the team. As we talked about, that's an important part of communication. So someone that's gonna be hardworking and committed, I think you want to work along with those coaches, but someone who's also open to your ideas, and suggestions. And it could vary. You could be looking to find a head coach to work with, and you have no experience, or you could have 5 years experience, or maybe you have like 15 or 20 years experience. So those things can vary a little bit, but I do think assistant coaches, from my experience, and I was an assistant coach last summer, which was really cool for me, but they want to be valued. You want to be valued. So making sure your head coach can show value to you and appreciate you, and also give you responsibility, so that you can feel part of it, that you're contributing. That's a discussion, but then it's ongoing, I think.
Awesome. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time as head coaches and as assistant coaches. And I think, I won't say 100%, but it could be 100%. A lot of the people I work with are still some of like the closest friends that I have, and being able to, you're not necessarily going to be best friends with everybody that's on your coaching staff, but being able to get along with the people that are on your coaching staff is pretty important. There's lots of laughs to be had, and there's lots of positive experiences, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of tough things you can go through as a coaching staff, with deciding who's on the court, deciding what systems you're going to run, just being able to interact with each other in a positive way in a stressful environment. All those things are really kind of key as well. You can, imagine having a great time with an assistant coach all through training. You get to a competition and things go sideways. So I think that personality, and not that you have the same personality, but like you said, that you complement the people that you're with, and that you can get along as well, because you do spend a lot of time together and you're on the coaching staff with somebody.
Yeah, that's good point. Really good points. You need to be able to work together, and that's key.
Yeah, as you depending on your commitment level, you spend a lot more time with your coaching staff sometimes than your actual friends and family outside of the sport. So, but like I said, lots of good things can happen along the way too.
There's a lot of club coaches watching. Like, I'm pretty passionate about this, because I've seen this a lot in coaching, and parents are some of the best people I've met in my coaching. People that you meet is one of the best things about sports, parents and coaches. But in club sports, you're gonna be questioned and challenged by a parent in your coaching somewhere. Hopefully it's not too much, but it's gonna happen. And
Mhm.
I've seen it happen to the best coaches that I've looked up to. At winning national championships, provincial championships, losing, doesn't matter. So having a coach that's gonna support you, and be there for you is really big, because I've seen some tough situations happen with that. So I
Mhm.
think it's like the elephant in the room. People sometimes don't want to talk about it, but I like to talk about it because I've just seen it and lived it, and that's part of it too, like it's okay, but having a coach that's going to help you and be there for you is going to be really, really valuable for you.
Agreed. Good people in your corner always.
Yep.
This is a great segue into our next section. It's like you knew it was coming. We're going to talk about parents and relationship with parents. And I mean, at a post-secondary level, you're dealing with parents less than at a club level, but you still have to interact with them, and through your club coaching, over your last 20 years of coaching, you've definitely encountered parents. So in positive, and I'm sure less than positive situations. So looking at a club coach who's watching this, looking at, okay, I'm going to coach club next season. What are some kind of things that either have worked or haven't worked for you over the years, or maybe some things you've learned from, in terms of creating a positive relationship with the parents of the athletes that are on your team? So I kind of have it chunked into preseason, during the season, and postseason. So we can start off with preseason. So you're going to have a club, you have your team, you've gone through tryouts, and now your team is selected. What do you do next?
Pray. No, no, for sure. I think one of the first things you'd want to do is, again, we talk about people business, and you want to have a great rapport with your athletes, great rapport with your coaches. You want to have a great rapport with your parents. So this one's just can become a little more tricky. But as I mentioned, there's so many amazing parents out there and wonderful experience I've had. But I think coaches need to, at the start, have a parental meeting and really communicate your philosophy as a coach, so they understand what you believe in as a coach and your expectations for the athletes, for your coaches, and for them as parents. So
Okay.
how we do things,
Mm-hmm.
and geez, I think a few years I coached where I never had parent meetings, when I think of over my school career. And then, Jim Schreier was a mentor of mine, and he's like, this is how we do it. And I'm like, whoa, all right. And it was good. It's kind of like the teacher setting the guidelines of the classroom rules first day of class, and then, but I think having them involved and really well communicated on is really important. One of the challenges is, what if a parent isn't there, or maybe the parents aren't together, so only one parent's there, but both end up coming to watch the games. So really making it mandatory as much as you can. And if for some reason they can't be there, to send the information electronically, but there's a point where, like this, communicate well in advance when the parent meeting is, give them a few weeks or a month or 2 months. But this is what we're doing, and we really want your participation there. And I like having the athletes there for part of it, if not all of it, but then sometimes maybe it can just be the parents talking. But yeah, I think that's really important, to set the guideline, and then also answer questions, and
Mm-hmm.
you explain that you're not perfect, you're going to make mistakes, but this is why you coach and what you're all about, and this is what I expect from you in terms of being a parent, right? So I think that's the start. And then, during the season or during the training, if they have issues, say that I think parents, myself, this should be able to talk to the coach. I've seen situations from hockey and other sports, volleyball, basketball, you need to go through a parent rep, and the parent rep comes to the coach. Again, I don't think that's going to be the most effective way from my experience. I think coaches need to have kind of the courage or to have those difficult conversations. So they need to be open to sitting down with the parents. And I think just the rule needs to be, in my opinion, like 48 hours after they're unhappy about a practice or a tournament, if they want to speak, you know, and then you should be able to talk to the, you know, parent about that. There's lots of thought is, should the athlete be there, you know, to hear that, and that type of thing. I think depending on the age or the situation, and it may or may not warrant it, you know. But I do think they need to understand that the meeting needs to be respectful and constructive. It doesn't mean that they can't question something, but it cannot go off the rails. And to add to that, you know, that you don't want text messages or you don't want emails, because tone can be misinterpreted. It's very easy to do that and hide behind that. And, you know, I've seen it happen when maybe someone's had a couple beverages or just aren't in the right frame of mind. And that's not good. So just kind of in person, or if not on the phone, you know, but prefer in person, you know, just a little more personal in 48 hours after during the season, talk about stuff. Anytime it's safety matter, health and safety, wellness, you know, really important. Playing time. I think I'm okay to talk about that a little bit. At the university level, I wouldn't be as much want to do that, but at the club level or certain ages, I may, but may not either. I think it's one of those things where, you know, I would encourage the athletes to come and talk to them and say, this is a better approach, you know, if they're frustrated with something.
Yeah, depends on the topic that they're wanting to discuss.
So yeah, just kind of having that communication lines open, and for them, feel free. But there's a method to do it that's respectful and professional, and that's something that I would really want to emphasize and say, if it isn't followed, then, you know, probably the son or daughter is not going to be a member of the team any longer, because that can. And
these, so, you know, the parent meeting that you mentioned that you recommend having at the beginning of the season, this would be something that you would have outlined, that process of how like ongoing communication would work out. You'd state that kind of right from the beginning, so everybody's really clear about it. And what about postseason?
Yeah, the other, I think, important thing during the season that I've encountered, and it's a tough one because you get to know people and they want to go for lunch with you or breakfast with you or supper for you. Maybe you want to have a beverage with you. And then where's that line drawn between coach and parents? So I think you can do that as a coach, especially volunteer coach, but you need to also be careful. You have to be aware of what message you're sending and the perception of other people. You know what I mean? So, and that's just stuff that I've learned that can create some ill feelings when nothing was intended. You know, for me, a single person, I'm invited for supper. Thank you very much. You know, that's very nice. But, you know, then what do the other 10 parents think of that? You know, and that's reality. That happens with lots of people. So you have to be, you know, honest and unbiased in the way you coach, and not play favoritism. And some people interpret that a parent doing that, they might think that's what their end goal is, right? Rather than just being really kind and friendly. So it's just something to think of during the season, you know. And obviously, if you are with them, I don't think you should be discussing the team,
right?
You know? Because and these are real things that can happen, and from experience, and you know, because then sometimes they could go say you said this, and maybe you did say that, and it's not appropriate, or maybe you didn't, and then you have trouble. So, kind of got to set the boundaries there, and then after season, I think, you know, just getting some feedback from them is good. You know, like, what did you like? You know, what didn't you like? Or maybe say, what can we do better? I like that. And not just for them a chance to dump. I think that's too easy. You know, it's like for me with my athletes, I'm not just going to tell them what they struggled with and what their weaknesses are, that's not going to develop their confidence or have a good relationship. You say, hey, you're doing this and this and this really well, but here's a couple areas maybe we can do better. And I think the same thing, parents can do that for coaches, and feedback's a gift. Our athletic director gave me that quote, and you might not always like it, but if it can make you better, then it's a positive, and hopefully the feedback is constructive to say, hey, we can be more organized, or communication can be better, or more tournaments or less tournaments, or more intensity, or whatever, right? But having that opportunity is good, and just kind of in a bit of a respectful and constructive forum. And then obviously I think having a wind-up is really important to say thank you, again, and it's fun, you enjoy working with their sons or daughters, and you enjoyed meeting them, and thanks for all your work and thanks for all your support. And it's, again, that people business and creating friendships and memories and having a lot of good times are what it's all about.
Absolutely. I think it extends, from your initial talk about, learning about athletes, learning about their family, being able to, call their parent by their name to say hi and how are you and how's the dog, whoever. And it's not, and I don't even mean that, it's not in a calculated sense. It's just getting to know the families and the people that you're around. I think that goes a long way with athletes or with parents, and vice versa. Like when they care about you as a coach and know your dog's name or what you like to spend your free time doing, it creates some pretty great relationships and creates a nice circle of support. So even when you mentioned like maybe something's gone awry, something's not quite right, that it creates an open and trusting environment to be able to discuss it, to figure out a way forward. So all of that kind of encircles just having a great relationship with those families and the coaches.
Yeah.
Great point.
I think having that social interaction at the end is really positive for everyone, Again, a little tip maybe is make sure you keep that respectful professional image on, especially if it turns into a more of a social outing, because I've seen things go wrong in those areas too. So but definitely great to celebrate the year, and most importantly, the athletes, with the parents, because they've all been invested a lot into it, and that's important.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
I guess like the last relationship we're going to kind of address, it's a pretty important one. I think it's one that a lot of coaches, whether they're experienced or not, maybe sometimes forget, but that relationship with referees. So maybe as a coach, what could you be doing to build a positive relationship with referees?
Well, I think the first thing coaches should do is have to ref a few games. And
that's perfect. Yes.
That would really get appreciation of the job they have to do. And I didn't know it at the time, but when I was officiating minor hockey growing up, I was like a 13, 14, 15-year-old and learning to have coaches yell at me or parents. And then just going on and officiating as a phys ed teacher, you often had to ref some volleyball or basketball games where I started out teaching. You get an appreciation of the job and how important it is for games. If you don't have officials, you're not going to have games, or they're not going to be as good. So really showing an appreciation and respect for the job they do is key. And they're trying and understanding they're going to try to do their best, and listen, I'm competitive and I'll tell the officials after, like if I've got the odd yellow card, in volleyball, but it doesn't go to necessarily anything personal there. It's just competing. And this is at the university level where it's even is more competitive, but after, I want to shake their hands and, if I was in the wrong, say sorry, and maybe they're going to say sorry, and they're human and they're doing the best they can. And tomorrow's a new day. And I'm a big believer in that. And when I see what happens a little bit in the club and school with some 14U and 16U coaches just getting after officials, especially that are young and starting out, it's very disturbing to me, because we need more officials and we need more good coaches, just like we need more good coach. We need more good officials, just like good coaches. But you want to be thoughtful in how you treat them, you know. And I've seen some people be pretty mean, and I don't think that's cool. I don't think that's the right sportsmanship you should be showing, or the right message that you should be showing. You need to be a class act and important. I mean, they have a responsibility and a job to do too, but I think from a coach's standpoint, it's important you have a good relationship with officials and show your players that they're important, you know. And one of the things with my teams now is I'll be very upset if one of them gets a yellow card, you know. If anyone's going to take one, I want it to be me, that they should be showing respect. And I mean, I should as a coach, but they know that, you know what I mean? That not to do that to officials.
No, that's pretty good. I mean, it's funny. We always, as coaches, we're chatting with athletes all the time about, you know, respect, and trying to talk about some of those qualities that are going to be lifelong. And then as coaches, maybe not the majority, like we disrespect an official or a referee. So, you know, just practice what you preach, you know, golden rule, pretty important. What would be, in your experience, like your top 3 or 4 things to never do to an official? What are the negatives or speed bumps?
Well, I've probably done them, but
what's the top 4, Rick Scott?
No.
You don't have to do that.
I think the other thing, just with officials quickly, and then I'll answer that, is like they're often pretty educated about the rules in the sport. Like most coaches should take an officials clinic, and I've kind of learned that obviously through our athletes taking them and me going in there, because there's questions I don't know the answer to, and I'm just like, holy smokes, you know. So I think understanding that is, you don't know what you don't know, like go to an officials clinic, you know. I think almost every coach should need to do that. And then just the other part of that is, I think officials, and I think they're doing it much better, need to understand the job coaches have to do. You know, it's mutual respect, you know, and just the last thing with that, I went and spoke to the officials once. They kindly asked me a couple years ago to speak to them about what we look for at coaches, or what we like and don't like, and being professional, like not all buddy with them before games. I even think at the 16U, 18U level, like you can be personal, hi, how you doing? But, you know, there needs to be a level of class and respect there. But communicating with each other, what do you want to see from us as coaches, and officials asking, what do you want to see from us, you know, is really healthy, you know. And I think there needs to be more dialogue between coaches and officials, you know. I'm a lot friendlier about 2 hours after the game than I am like 30 minutes before the game. I don't want to, I kind of get dialed in. And then 3 or 4 things not to do as coaches. You know, I think, you know, I don't think there should be a physical confrontation. Hopefully there isn't. I know there has been occasions. You see it more in hockey, and it doesn't happen that often, but you've seen it where there's been a push or a shove or a grab, or there's just no place for that. And I think, you know, just a verbal assault after a game, you know, is not cool. You know, I think if you need to have a disagreement, you need to get yourself composed and then discuss it in an hour or 2, or maybe it's in 2 days, right? Depending on how worked up you are. So just that physical and verbal confrontation, and those are no brainers, but I think it's still good for people to understand that's something that they should just absolutely not do. I don't know about any other ones. Maybe you guys have some for me.
for you. No, I
think you should always shake their hand, always, win or lose. There's a really simple one, but I've seen coaches not do that. And then, they're best friends with them when they win, but if it doesn't go their way, they're not. And listen, they got a tough job. They're not out to try to, you know, screw anyone, in my opinion, you know. So you need to kind of also be respectful in that manner. So
yeah, I
mean,
mean,
sure you're shaking their hand.
Yeah, I've been lucky never to see a physical confrontation with a referee, but like I think of like you know, like the people that are kind of like making faces across the court at officials, you know, like being really dramatic. Let alone
arm flares.
yeah, you know, like again, we wouldn't want our athletes, hopefully, to act that way to anyone, like whether it's another coach, another athlete, your coaching staff, or an official. So it's kind of just thinking about practice what you preach. It's not going to get you anywhere at that time with the official. And then what is it sending to everyone that's watching you do that? Parents, you know?
Yeah, you don't want to show them up, you know,
Yeah.
and embarrass them. And that's definitely, it's not a verbal, it's not a physical confrontation, but, you know, I think there's a point that you align, and then if you get that card or they tell you to be quiet, then you need to understand that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think the other one is just, you know, trying to, like you said, understand the rules and just try to meet them, like try to play by the rules. Like if they need a lineup card in by a certain time, like trying to do everything within my power to make sure they can, you know, go on and do their job. And I'm not the nail that's poking up that they have to keep coming over and bugging me. And I mean, every coach in the world, me especially, like you talk to your team first and then you do a lineup, and then, you know, the lineup takes 4 minutes instead of 3 minutes. I get it, but, you know, just understanding like their job, like you said, and trying to do your best to like play by the rules. It's like they're not doing any special rules. They're just that's the volleyball game, and we're expected to try to do it. So
yeah, I think if you ever see them do a great job, you know, and maybe it's your game. Again, easy to say after you've won, but you know, after you've lost, or maybe you just happen to be watching another game, like to go say, hey, I think you're doing a great job as an official. Keep it up. You know, that can mean a lot to them.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, I think one aside that I would kind of add into this, which is not so much necessarily a coach's actions, but teaching your captain how to interact with an official, when they can interact, the rules around interacting with officials, I think is pretty important, even from, you know, the first time an athlete goes to take a toss and understand their responsibility, how that works, decisions they need to make, what decision they should be making about like a toss or a side, or you know, during a game, technically they're the ones that are supposed to communicate with that first official. So I think instructing your players on when, how, why to do those things, and so they're prepared for it. Because I don't know how many times I've seen a coach send an athlete over to the official, and the athlete's like, what am I doing? What am I saying? What am I supposed to do here? So I think that can be a really effective way to bolster that communication with officials when your athletes know how to do that properly.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Well, we are getting to the end of our time together, so we have a few last minute questions to fire at you to see how we can close this out. So the last kind of on topic question would be, what would be 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would have for any coach that's out there watching, just in relation to coaching and coaching your sport?
One of the pieces of advice I would say is to try to find a mentor or couple mentors, people that you can talk volleyball with, sports with, and because they're really valuable, because it's a tough job, and just to get some feedback and advice has been really instrumental for me. And and I think any coach could really benefit by having someone to call and talk about, whether it's managing players or technical or tactical, or dealing with budgets, or dealing with travel or competition or parents, you know. So I think having a mentor is one of the first things I would say. And I'd say, you know, to also, you know, really work hard at it, take pride in what you do. Try to be the best coach you can be, and you're always going to be learning, and you're going to make mistakes, but if you're always trying to be better and trying to do a good job, I think a lot of good things are going to happen. And because again, you're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay, but you have to have that motivation and passion to be the best you can be and take pride in the job you're doing. And it's really, really important, affecting these young people's lives, you know. don't overestimate, but don't underestimate the impact you can have. There's a good line a friend of mine, teacher, coach, told me. And the last I'd say is make sure you're open to keep learning, be a lifelong learner, and change. There's more than one way to do things, and the game changes and philosophies change and people can change. So I think you want to be open to new ideas, you know. I think you need to have your philosophy and your beliefs, you know, but definitely open to change and grow as a coach is important. So those would be the three for me.
Very solid. Now my most favorite question to ask everybody on our video podcast here. What are your 1 to 2 top restaurant choices in Nova Scotia?
Can't be Daryl's. That was on Dan Oda's list.
Oh, that's a given. Well, there's going to be one for sure is the Micmac Tavern in Dartmouth, where I live.
Yes.
The dark side is not that dark, but the Micmac Tavern is a must if you haven't on Waverly Road. And a couple go-tos for me. I just got to make sure I'm not forgetting Athens on Quinpool.
Oh, so good.
I've invested a little bit, a few shares in there.
I thought you were a part owner now.
Should be. Yeah, Daryl's was up there, but Athens, Micmac Tavern, and what would be number 3? You guys could probably tell me.
Oh gosh.
I don't know.
The Naked Crate.
Oh, I know. Phil's Seafood. Boom.
Oh, nice one.
I'm so glad I remembered that because I really like that, and I had it when I first came here. Was taken there on my recruiting or my job interview phase, and
Nice.
So good. So those are
Perfect.
3 really good spots to go.
Johnny, we're gonna have an epic list by the time we're finished season 1 of our podcast of places to eat. We're trying to accumulate a list, so every time John and I are on the road together for work, we have our list of places to eat in every community we go to.
When we're allowed out of our houses, we're just going to ask for like 2 weeks of travel time from Jason, our executive director, and we're just going to do a province-wide tour of all these restaurants. Yeah,
true story. Well, people who are watching, even though we're still in a pandemic, I think actually most of those restaurants Rick has listed are doing takeout or some way. So find your way to support our local restaurants during this time, especially when things start to open up. So many yummy things to eat and places to go. I love it. But thank you, Rick, very much for coming on with us today. Episode 3 of SIDEOUT with VNS. So thanks for giving us your time and sharing your thoughts and knowledge with us and the rest of our community.
My pleasure. And thank you guys both for doing this. Had a lot of fun, and I look forward to watching future podcasts. And I think it's great for volleyball. And it's one thing that I found that's come out of this challenging time is some of the PD and through Zoom and podcasts that can happen, and even communication between coaches, professionally developed. So thanks for you guys part of growing the game and taking the time and initiative to do this initiative.
Absolutely. And thank you to all our viewers today for tuning in to SIDEOUT with VNS episode 3 with Rick Scott. We're excited to bring you more episodes in the future, so please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get a notification when we post new episodes, and we'll always let you know on social media when a new one's coming. So thanks, and we'll see you guys next time.